So 2020 was a big year. I know the state of the world was less than great, but I also mean for me in general. I actually got my driver's license, finished my biggest video to date, had medical issues in January that I thought would end me well before COVID became widespread, and played quite a few games which I've been meaning to play for some time. Some of which came out a while ago, and others that were ported to the Switch this year, meaning I had no excuse not to play them. In fact, I realized that I'd rather talk about the games I played this year much more than just the ones that happened to release this year. So, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Basically, if I played it this year for the first time, then it can be on this list. There will be a couple of 2020 releases or ports, so you'll know some of what to expect, and hopefully you'll see a game or two you've never heard of or haven't heard much of. And now with that confusing intro out of the way, I am sorry about that, here is my list of the top 10 games I played in 2020. A Short Hike is a game where you play as a girl trying to climb a mountain. Yes, I am starting to see a pattern with the games I like. This time, the girl is a bird named Claire who is waiting for a phone call from her mom, and the best service would be at the top of the mountain. There are some NPCs to talk to, collectibles to look for, and challenges to find along the way. A Short Hike had been staring me in the face for quite some time. I bought it on Steam last year, had my hands cramped from using the keyboard, and didn't touch it again. But the positive reviews made me feel like I was missing out, so when it came to the Switch, I decided to give it another try. I wasn't disappointed. The controls felt a lot better, and as the area opened up, I really began to get sucked into the game, just seeing how high I could get up with what feathers I had. It really felt like the whole island was just this charming playground to explore, and it always had something new like the joggers or the boat to make that particular area something unique. It's a small game. I accidentally finished it again while trying to get footage for this video, but it's certainly memorable. Under a Star Called Sun is a difficult game to talk about, and it may surprise you that it's even on my list at all. Well, I think it partly has to do with the fact that it surprised me. The game is free, and it runs through any desktop browser through itch.io. I don't want to ruin the story, because the story is what's important. The graphics are simple, and the gameplay is just about walking, but the story, the idea the game is trying to get across, worked for me. It was touching, and while it won't be for everyone, I recommend you give it a quick play, just to try it yourself. Who knows? Maybe it'll surprise you too. The Henry Stigma Collection is a point-and-click, choose-your-own-adventure game full of jokes and references, and where your choices actually matter. After being bogged down by a video singing this game's praises, I'm not sure there's much else I can say that I haven't already said. It's charming, it's funny, and when it takes itself seriously, it managed to have me take it seriously. It's no masterpiece, but I just might call it a classic. Shovel Knight Treasure Trove is a game I finally played when dealing with my medical troubles. I have a love-hate relationship with Shovel of Hope, since I get frustrated when I play it, but then replay it once or twice a year. Oddly enough, I think it might actually be a kind of comfort game for me, something I can come back to whenever I need to play something familiar. As for the DLC, I tried Plague of Shadows, hated the difficulty curve, assumed the rest of the DLC was similar, and didn't bother with the rest of it until this year. And now, after just skipping Plague of Shadows, I love Spectre of Torment, and I think King of Cards was just a fun campaign to play through. While Shovel Knight always felt bulky and slow, Spectre Knight feels quick and acrobatic. It made every mistake truly feel like my own compared to some in Shovel Knight. King Knight's moveset feels both bulky and smooth, and the card game was certainly an interesting thing to add into the mix. As for Plague of Shadows, well, at least the tango song's really good. I think individually, Spectre of Torment and Shovel of Hope are worth your time, but as a collection, both of them along with Plague and King Knight's campaigns make for a worthwhile purchase overall. While researching choose-your-own-adventure games, I came across the Yogg. The Yogg is a turn-based, story-driven, choose-your-own-adventure game with a charming art style. The Yogg is arriving to the town in 6 weeks, and you have to decide what to do before it arrives. Chopping wood, tending to the sick, fighting in the arena, or many of the other things you can do in the town. You'll make choices while you're there, gaining and sometimes losing various ability points. The game requires you to choose at least 2 people, which did bother me a bit, but I didn't mind, and it quickly helps show that the events in one character's story can carry over into another's. You're going to hear me say this a lot, but I think it's best for you to go into the game blind, so I won't spoil anything here about certain events or even what happens when the Yogg arrives. But if you like games where your choices matter, then I think you'll enjoy this. I think Dungeons & Dragons players would enjoy it as well, but it may be too simple, so I don't want to say for sure. Though I will say it's been great to play with friends. Almost every session has been a blast, and having choices matter and overlap meant that when certain things happened, someone always got blamed and pretty much bullied for the rest of the evening. I haven't forgotten what you did to the bard, Ethan. But yeah, it's hard to pin down who to recommend this to per se, so hey, if this sounds interesting to you, then give it a shot. Also, I did play this with my friends on our collective channel, Beta Bit Virtual Fellas or whatever, so if you're cool with non-stop profanity, then maybe go check it out. This wasn't meant to be a plug, it just came to mind when recording this, just now. So yeah, go check it out. Or don't. On to the next one. I don't think this game needs any introduction, although it's been mine into the Zelda franchise. I had been hesitant to play it. I only bought it because I lost a bet to my friend Max and tried streaming it, but then stream issues were a thing, so it just kinda discouraged me from playing it. When I went through my health issues at the start of 2020 and was mostly bedridden, I finally decided to spend my time playing through Breath of the Wild, and I'm so glad I did. The world felt lived in, the style was refreshing, the motion controls were annoying in handheld mode, but the game was great. I've been trying to play through more open world games. I've been playing The Witcher 3 and Skyrim on and off for about a year and a half now, and I finished The Outer Worlds this year as well, but I liked Breath of the Wild because it felt as though it had more natural and straightforward exploration, thanks to things like the map marking camera, and it blended it with its gameplay and atmosphere to create a great experience. The first time I saw the energy dragon appear over the horizon is a moment that's going to stick with me for a long time. It gave the world a sense of scope and a lived-in feeling, in the same way the story of Cthulhu was about the insignificance of humanity from the perspective of a giant monster. I think that's what that was about. I'll be excited when the sequel to Breath of the Wild is finally released, but for now, I'm glad the first one feels like a complete experience without too much the sequel would even need to fix. Just more Breath of the Wild, less motion controls, and I'm sure the game will do just fine. Of all the games on this list, I don't think any is more synonymous with gaming in 2020, quite like Animal Crossing New Horizons. Everyone from kids to schools to restaurants to even politicians have used Animal Crossing as a means of interacting with one another in a way which simply isn't possible in some cases during a normal year, let alone one with a global pandemic taking place. Initially, I wasn't all that excited. The game looked nice, but I simply hadn't played an Animal Crossing game before, and the time restrictions in Stardew Valley left me more anxious than relaxed, so I was expecting a similar experience. Instead, it was a good game, which I got my fair share of hours on when the pandemic first hit, until around the middle of June, and then came back to it recently to explore the new content. Which, by the way, if you've not been on since May, then I do recommend giving it a shot, and maybe try using one of the holiday events as a good means of exploring the new content. While I'd say that Stardew Valley is punctual but responsive, Animal Crossing is slow but relaxing and approachable. From the simple shaped yet textured visuals to the sound design and general pacing, the game is less about how quickly you can beat the game, and more about what you do along the way. How you develop your island, what villagers you meet, and what strange details you choose to add. It gives me a similar feeling to that of Minecraft in a way, because the main objective isn't really what you're there for. It's about getting more outfits, finding the right villagers to invite, and just customizing your island, and then looking back at what you've done and being proud of what you've created. Still, I get why I left it. At some point the game can feel a little more like chores once you've gotten so far into the game, and no game is meant to be played forever. It would be nice if the villagers had a bit more personality, more dialogue, asked more questions, and more interactions with things and each other. I just think that would be an easy way to add more content while also building a greater connection with your villagers. But, as it is, it's a good game I've gotten my fair share of time with, and I'm sure I'll see more use out of it down the road. Also, my favorite villager is Megan, and no, I don't care that you didn't ask. Some of you may know that the Bioshock franchise was a huge influence for, well, another game I've discussed on this channel. So when the Bioshock Collection came to the Switch, I played through all three, and came back with some interesting opinions on each game. If you know nothing about Bioshock, but were disappointed with Bendy's story, then play Bioshock 1. I won't spoil anything, but I promise if you don't mind some gritty, realistic graphics, darker themes, and some hack-and-slash gameplay, then it'll be worth your time for the story, world building, atmosphere, and the blend between the gameplay and the narrative. Bioshock 1 pays off what it sets up, has a fleshed out and interesting world, with compelling characters and graphics that even look good on the Switch. The game isn't perfect, but I still love it. As for Bioshock 2, it basically has a weaker story, but more refined gameplay, along with excellent mixes of moment-to-moment story and gameplay. And Bioshock Infinite, well, it's actually more visually appealing and has some pretty fun high points in its gameplay, though its story and world building isn't as well done. I will say though that the Lutessas are probably some of the best characters in the whole franchise.
Got a miss, and a miss.
Again, I don't want to say too much, simply because I went in almost completely blind for all three, and felt that playing through each game was much more enjoyable because of it. So, play Bioshock. So, I have never played the Portal games. They may be a staple to gaming, but I only ever owned Nintendo consoles, which just so happen to have never had any Valve games on them, with the exception of like LEGO Dimensions. So I sat down with my sister and played through both of them. And while Portal 1 was great, Portal 2 was even better. Portal 2 was just as clever as Portal 1 in its writing, but also funnier, and even managed to pack in a couple of good emotional beats. All while managing to further expand the use of portals through things like gels, and expand the world of Portal with the introduction of characters like Wheatley and Cave Johnson. If you haven't played Portal 2 somehow, I promise it's worth your time. Valve games tend to go on sale every few months, so you may even be able to snag it for less than $10. Video games that are consistently funny are also hard to come by, so I feel like that alone makes it well worth your time. You know what's strange about Papers, Please? I wouldn't even call it fun, but I would possibly call it the best game ever made. It's engaging, absorbing, and interesting, but it's not inherently fun. It's not a dour, miserable experience that requires the right mood to play it like The Binding of Isaac or Darkwood, but it's also not an upbeat experience full of fun mechanics like Animal Crossing. It surprises me to this day how many people I talk to about video games, indie games even, and don't know anything about Papers, Please. So, if you don't know, Papers, Please is a game where you play a Border Patrol inspector and you deny or approve people based on who you're allowed to let in, or if their documents have any typos or are expired. You need to take care of your family and only have so much time in a day to process people. The game, in concept, is boring, and yet is elevated by its blend of gameplay and story. The game always gives you at least two choices at any moment: deny or approve, but you'll be penalized if you reject someone who's allowed in, and vice versa. Some people will beg you or even attempt to bribe you in order to let them through despite not having the correct papers. Some may be telling the truth, and others may be lying. It's not just a matter of penalty, but also a matter of what they do if you let them in. You only have two choices, and yet there is so much that is wrapped up in just pressing a red or green stamp. There's not a morally right path when everyone is capable of lying, even the government that assigned you this job. Still, the game gives you enough information to understand the stakes of your choices, with enough ambiguity to question what is truly the right thing to do. It's a game that is full of storylines and player agency through each person you process. It may not be fun per se, but it takes a boring concept of inspecting papers and creates engaging gameplay with a fascinating narrative. It makes for a unique game, and one I think everyone should at least know about. It's available on PC, mobile, and PlayStation Vita, so if you've got a means of playing it, then I recommend you do. Or at least watch Jacksepticeye's playthrough if nothing else. And that's it. Only about 2 months late this time around, so I'm calling that a success. I'm uploading an update video alongside this, so I won't babble on here. As usual, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you whenever I upload next. So, yeah, I'll see you then.